The wind was cruel that morning, cutting through the town of Dead River like a blade sharpened on the edge of hate. The air smelled of dust and sweat, and somewhere in the crowd a rope creaked, a slow, dreadful sound that made even the birds hold their breath. "They said she wasn't one of us," whispered a woman, her hands clutched around her shawl. "Not white enough to be saved, not Apache enough to be forgiven." Elena Greyhawk stood beneath the old sycamore tree, with a noose tight around her neck. Her wrists were bound, her lip was split, and blood had dried along her jawline. Yet her eyes, those fierce, storm-dark eyes, didn't show fear, only fire. The sheriff's voice broke the silence. "For witchery, for thieving, and for consorting with the Redskins, this woman is sentenced to hang." "She ain't no woman," someone spat from the crowd. "She's a curse." The rope above her swayed in the dry wind. Elena didn't flinch. Her gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the red sun rose over the canyon ridge, gold and violent in its beauty. Somewhere out there, she had once believed, justice still lived. "Any last words, half-blood?" the sheriff sneered. Elena raised her chin. "You'll meet your God before I meet mine." The crowd gasped, and the sheriff kicked the lever. The world went silent, except for the sound of rope straining and feet scraping against wood. Her body jerked once, twice, then stilled. The wind caught her hair, tossing it like a black flame against the sky. And then, through the stillness, came a sound. The low, rhythmic thud of hooves. Every head turned. A man on a dark stallion emerged through the curtain of dust, a stranger with a torn duster coat and eyes like blue steel. His horse was lathered and restless, its breath puffing white in the morning chill. A rifle hung from his saddle. The sheriff stepped forward, hand on his gun. "Keep riding, Crane, this ain't your business." Silas Crane didn't answer. He dismounted, boots sinking into the dust. The crowd parted as he walked, not sure whether to make way or draw on him. His gaze never left Elena. The rope creaked again, and something cold flared behind his eyes. "Cut her down," he said quietly. The sheriff laughed. "She's already gone." "What's it to you?" Silas's hand moved faster than a rattler. The knife flashed and the rope split in two. Elena fell into his arms with a gasp that tore through the silence. Her eyes opened, barely, but they opened. The sheriff drew his gun, fury red across his face. "You just made yourself an enemy of Dead River." Silas rose, holding Elena close against him. "Then I reckon the town's my enemy." The sheriff aimed. "Put her down, Crane." The rancher turned his head slowly. "She ain't half of anything," he said. "She's whole. And she's mine." The crowd froze. Even the wind seemed to stop. The sheriff fired. The bullet whined past Silas's ear and tore a splinter from the tree. Silas dropped to one knee, pulled his revolver, and shot back, clean through the sheriff's badge. The man fell dead before he hit the dust. Gasps erupted, but Silas didn't look twice. He lifted Elena, mounted his horse, and rode through the parting crowd. Not one man dared stop him. Behind them, the rope swung empty in the wind. They rode until the sun dipped behind the canyon walls, and the town became nothing but a memory in the haze. Elena was barely breathing, her head resting against his chest. "Hold on," he whispered. "Don't you give up now." When they reached his cabin by the red mesas, the stars had begun to burn holes in the night sky. Silas carried her inside and laid her on a cot by the fire. She was half-conscious, mumbling words in a language he didn't understand. He worked through the night, cleaning the rope burns from her neck, wrapping her wounds, feeding her sips of water when she stirred. He'd done this before, for men, for friends, for himself, but never with a hand that trembled. 3 days passed. She burned with fever and fought ghosts in her sleep. Each time her breathing faltered, Silas would shake her gently. "Don't you dare stop now," he'd whisper. "You ain't done fighting yet." On the 4th morning she woke. Her voice was hoarse, her eyes heavy but alive. "Why?" she rasped. Silas looked up from the chair where he'd been dozing. "Why what?" "Why'd you save me?" He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "Because no one saved me when I needed it." She stared at him for a long moment. "You could have been killed," he shrugged. "Wouldn't be the first time." Silence filled the small cabin. The fire popped softly. Outside, a coyote called to the fading moon. My father was white, she said at last. Trapper from Missouri. My mother, she was Apache. They killed her when I was 10. Said she cast a spell on their cattle. The sheriff, her voice broke. He said he'd let me live if I worked for him. I did, for years, until I wouldn't anymore. Silas listened, jaw tight. You don't owe nobody your life, Elena. She looked at him, surprised. You know my name? He gave a small nod. Heard it once, in town. They spoke it like a curse. I thought it sounded more like a song. For the first time since she'd met him, she smiled. It was faint but real. Days turned into weeks. Elena regained her strength, walking outside to feel the sun on her skin again. Silas taught her how to shoot, how to track cattle, how to mend a saddle. She was quick, faster than most men he knew, and quieter than any he'd met. Sometimes, when the sky turned purple over the mesas, he'd catch her staring at the horizon. You miss it? He asked once. The desert, she said. No, the peace that used to live in it. But peace, like mercy, was short-lived in the West. One evening, while they were tending the horses, a rider appeared, dusty, bleeding, terrified. He collapsed in front of them. Crane, he gasped. They're coming, Dead River men, 20 or more. Sheriff's brothers leading them. Elena's hand froze on the reins. They won't stop, she said softly. They'll burn this place down. Silas looked toward the horizon, where a dark cloud of dust was already rising. Then we stand. Elena turned to him, fierce. No, you can't fight them all. He loaded his rifle. I ain't trying to fight them all. Just the ones that come through my gate. She grabbed his arm. Please let me go. If they find me here, they'll kill you too. He looked at her then, the firelight in her eyes, the way her hands trembled, though her voice didn't. No one's taken you from me again. Elena, not while I breathe. Dawn came, painting the desert red as blood. The riders appeared like ghosts through the dust, rifles glinting in the morning light. Elena stood beside Silas on the porch, her long hair whipping in the wind. She wore his spare hat, his spare gun belt. The first rider shouted, Hand over the half-breed, Crane, and maybe we'll let you live. Silas spat in the dirt. Come take her! The men roared and charged. Gunfire cracked like thunder. Elena fired first, dropping a man clean from his horse. Silas's rifle barked beside her, echoing off the canyon walls. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. They fought side by side, the way only two people with nothing left to lose can fight. Each time she reloaded, he covered her. Each time he stumbled, she pulled him back to his feet. When the smoke cleared, the ground was littered with bodies and blood. The rest had fled into the hills. Elena dropped her rifle, chest heaving. It's over, she whispered. Silas turned to her, bleeding from a graze across his shoulder. It's done, he said softly. She walked to him, trembling, and pressed her forehead against his chest. You saved me twice. He rested his chin on her hair. No, he said quietly. You saved me once. They buried the dead beneath the red clay. Neither spoke as the sun rose higher, washing the land in gold. That night they sat by the fire outside the cabin, watching the embers float into the sky. Where will we go now? She asked. Silas poked at the fire with a stick. Anywhere they ain't. Elena smiled faintly. You sure about me, Silas? The world ain't kind to men who stand beside women like me. He turned, eyes steady. The world ain't kind, period. But it don't get to tell me who's mine. The night grew quiet, except for the wind moving through the grass. Somewhere in the distance, the old sycamore tree creaked in the dark, but this time the sound was softer, almost like a sigh of relief. And for the first time in her life, Elena Greyhawk didn't feel cursed. She felt claimed, not as property, not as pity, but as someone who had finally found her place in a world that had tried to hang her for existing. By morning, they were gone. Two riders heading west, the sun rising behind them, the past burning away with every mile. Back in Dead River, the townsfolk whispered of ghosts, of a woman they couldn't kill, and a man who defied death to save her. And when the wind blew through that old sycamore, They swore it didn't sound like a hanging rope anymore. It sounded like freedom.